They were warriors without equal, towering figures whose very presence could shake the courage of seasoned soldiers. The Bible speaks of them in whispers, shadowy titans who walked the earth both before and after the flood. Some were born from the forbidden union of divine beings and human women, like the mysterious Nephilim. Others rose after the waters receded, the Rephaim, the Anakim, and the fearsome clans of Emim and Zamzummim. Still others became legendary through the feats of a single champion, like Goliath and the Philistine giants. For thousands of years, their story has been told in fragments, scattered across scripture, hinted at in ancient scrolls, and preserved in the oral traditions of countless cultures. Today, we will uncover the 5 classes of giants described in the Bible and reveal the hidden story they didn't want you to know. The earliest giants are introduced in Genesis 6:4, which says, "The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of men and had children by them." The term Nephilim comes from the Hebrew root naphal, meaning to fall, often translated as fallen ones, or those who cause others to fall. According to a plain reading of the text, these giants were the direct offspring of the sons of God, a term many scholars believe refers to fallen angels and mortal women. This interpretation is supported by ancient Jewish texts like the Book of Enoch, which expands on the story, saying that fallen angels, called the Watchers, descended to earth, took human wives, and fathered giant children who became violent tyrants. The Book of Enoch even lists some of the names of these angels: Azazel, Semjaza, who allegedly taught mankind forbidden knowledge, the arts of war, the making of weapons, the use of enchantments, and even the secrets of the heavens. The Nephilim became so corrupt and destructive that, according to Genesis, they helped bring about God's judgment through the flood. Their reign was cut short, but the Bible's cryptic phrase, "and also afterward," suggests that they, or something like them, would return. After the flood, giants reappear, this time under a new name, Rephaim. In Deuteronomy 2:11, the Rephaim are described as an ancient race of giants, feared by surrounding nations. The prophet Isaiah, in Isaiah 14:9, uses the term Rephaim to refer to shades, or the spirits of the dead, suggesting a possible spiritual dimension to their identity. The Rephaim inhabited Canaan long before Israel entered the land. They are often described as mighty men and formidable warriors, and in some passages, their height is specifically mentioned as comparable to the Anakim. Some traditions hold that they were the descendants of post-flood Nephilim through surviving genetic lines. Others speculate that fallen angels once again corrupted mankind, producing a second generation of hybrids. The Rephaim appear not just in the Bible, but in the mythology of other cultures. The Ugaritic texts, ancient writings from Canaan, also speak of Rephaim, spirits of mighty kings who once lived on earth. This connection raises the possibility that the Rephaim were not just giants in stature, but carried an enduring spiritual legacy. When Moses sent 12 spies into the land of Canaan, 10 returned terrified. In Numbers 13:33, they reported, "We saw the Nephilim there. The descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them." The Anakim were descendants of a giant named Anak, who himself descended from the Rephaim. These giants occupied the hill country, fortifying cities and controlling key territories. The Israelites were so intimidated by their size and strength that the fear of the Anakim led directly to Israel's rebellion at Kadesh Barnea, delaying their entry into the Promised Land for 40 years. When Joshua finally led Israel into Canaan, Joshua 11:21-22 records that he destroyed the Anakim from the hill country, from Hebron, Debir, and Anab, from all the hill country of Judah and Israel. Yet the text notes that none were left in the land of the people of Israel. Only in Gaza, in Gath, and in Ashdod did some remain. This detail is important because these Philistine strongholds would later produce giants like Goliath. Tucked away in the early chapters of Deuteronomy are references to giant clans that most people have never heard of. The Emim, described in Deuteronomy 2:10-11, were great, numerous, and tall as the Anakim, and were considered Rephaim by the Moabites. Their name, Emim, means the terrible ones, or the dreaded ones, hinting at the fear they inspired. Then there were the Zamzummim, also called Zuzim in Genesis 14:5, who dwelt in the region of Ammon before being driven out by the Ammonites. Deuteronomy 2:20-21 says they were a people great and numerous and tall as the Anakim. Their unusual name may have been a mocking nickname given by their enemies, but their strength was no joke. Both the Emim and Zamzummim were remembered as fierce warrior nations whose very presence defined the geography and politics of the land long before Israel's arrival. The most famous giant of all is Goliath of Gath, introduced in 1 Samuel 17. Standing 6 cubits and a span, over 9 feet tall, Goliath was a seasoned warrior clad in bronze armor, weighing over 125 pounds, wielding a spear with an iron tip weighing 15 pounds. His defeat at the hands of the young shepherd David is one of the most iconic moments in Scripture. But Goliath was not an isolated case. 2 Samuel 21:15-22 and 1 Chronicles 24-8 mention other giants from Philistine territory, possibly Goliath's brothers or kin. There was Lami, the brother of Goliath, and a massive warrior with 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot. All of them are described as being descended from the Rephaim and as born to the giant in Gath. These men were the last living representatives of a once mighty giant lineage, and their final defeat marked the end of an era in Israel's history. The persistence of giants after the flood is one of the Bible's most intriguing mysteries. If the purpose of the flood was to wipe out the corruption of the Nephilim, how did giant races reappear? Some suggest that Noah's family carried recessive genetic traits from intermarriage before the flood. Others propose that fallen angels repeated their rebellion in the post-flood world. Still others argue that the phrase "and also afterward" in Genesis 6:4 hints that God allowed their return as part of a greater plan to be a test and a judgment for Israel. Beyond their physical size and strength, giants in the Bible represent spiritual opposition to God's purposes. Time after time, they appear as obstacles between God's people and the fulfillment of His promises, whether it was Israel entering the Promised Land, David establishing his kingdom, or the moral corruption before the flood. They are often portrayed as warriors of chaos, opposing the order God intended for His creation. And their story may not be over. In Matthew 24:37, Jesus says, "As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man." If those days were marked by the presence of Nephilim before the flood, could the end times see their return? Whether in physical form or through the same spiritual forces that empowered them, the giants may yet walk among us again.